Ma, drink this water first. Then I'm going to help you find your find.
On a hot afternoon in the busy streets of Lagos, a blind old woman sat alone by the roadside, thirsty and shaking. Cars passed. People stared. Nobody stopped. Until one poor girl with nothing but a small bottle of water chose to help her. What she did not know was this. The beggar she was helping was not poor. She was not homeless. She was not alone in this world. She was the missing mother of Lagos' youngest billionaire CEO. And the wicked woman who abandoned her was waiting comfortably inside his mansion. One small act of kindness was about to expose a dangerous secret, break an engagement, and change 3 lives forever. Because sometimes, the person you help on the street holds the key to your destiny. Sit tight, because we're about to tell you a shocking story you won't forget. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing tales. Drop a comment below and tell us where and what time you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. In the busy city of Lagos, where cars never stop honking and tall buildings shine under the hot sun, Daniel lived in a large glass mansion on the island. He was young, rich, and powerful. At just 30 years old, he was the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city. But inside that big house, there were secrets. Daniel loved only one person more than his money, his blind mother, Mrs. Grace. Every morning before going to work, he would walk into her room. "Good morning, Mum," he would say softly. Mrs. Grace would smile when she heard his voice. "My son, have you eaten?" Daniel would laugh gently. "You always ask that first." He would help her sit up, arrange her pillow, and make sure her breakfast was ready. Even though there were many workers in the house, Daniel liked to care for his mother himself. Mrs. Grace lost her sight many years ago in an accident. Since then, Daniel had been her eyes. But there was someone else living in the house. Patricia. She was beautiful, stylish, and always dressed in expensive clothes. She was Daniel's fiancée. Soon, they were supposed to get married. In front of Daniel, Patricia acted sweet and caring. "Good morning, Mama," she would say in a soft voice. Mrs. Grace would smile politely. "Good morning, my daughter." But the moment Daniel stepped out of the house, everything changed. Patricia's smile would disappear. Her voice would become cold. One afternoon, just after Daniel left for an important meeting, Patricia walked into Mrs. Grace's room. Mrs. Grace was sitting quietly, holding her walking stick. "Patricia, is that you?" she asked gently. "Yes, it's me," Patricia replied sharply. There was silence for a moment. Then Patricia spoke again, this time with anger. "Why are you always calling Daniel? You want him to sit at home with you forever." Mrs. Grace looked confused. "I only talk to my son." Patricia rolled her eyes even though Mrs. Grace could not see her. "You are blind. You should be grateful someone like me even greets you." Mrs. Grace's hands trembled slightly. "Did I offend you?" Patricia moved closer. "You are the problem in this house. If not for you, Daniel and I would have peace." Tears gathered in Mrs. Grace's sightless eyes. "I don't want trouble." Patricia scoffed and walked out, slamming the door loudly. This was not the first time. Some days, Patricia would delay her food. Some days, she would hide her walking stick. Other days, she would insult her quietly. And Mrs. Grace kept quiet. She did not want to cause problems between her son and the woman he loved. That evening, Daniel returned home tired but cheerful. "Mum," he called as he entered. Mrs. Grace quickly wiped her tears and forced a smile. "Welcome, my son." Daniel noticed her voice was weak. "Are you okay?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I am fine." Patricia walked in wearing a short red dress, smiling brightly. "Daniel, you look stressed. I made your favorite meal." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Thank you, love." Mrs. Grace stayed silent. Days passed. The tension in the house grew stronger. One morning, Daniel had to travel to Abuja for a one-day business meeting. Before leaving, he kissed his mother's forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow morning, Mum." "Travel safely," she said, holding his hand tightly for a little longer than usual. After Daniel left for the airport, Patricia stood at the top of the staircase, watching the gate close behind his car. Her face changed. She walked slowly to Mrs. Grace's room. "Mama," she said in a fake gentle tone, "let's go for a drive." Mrs. Grace looked surprised. "A drive?" "Yes. Fresh air will be good for you." Mrs. Grace hesitated. But she did not want trouble. "Okay." Patricia helped her stand and led her outside. Instead of calling the driver, she decided to drive herself. Mrs. Grace sat quietly in the passenger seat, unaware of where they were going. The car drove for a long time. From the quiet, expensive streets of the island to the busy mainland traffic. They entered Surulere, where buses shouted for passengers and traders sold goods by the roadside. Finally, Patricia stopped the car on a less busy street. She turned to Mrs. Grace. "This is where you belong," she said coldly. Mrs. Grace frowned. "What do you mean?" Patricia opened the door, stepped out, and pulled Mrs. Grace gently but firmly from the car. Before Mrs. Grace understood what was happening, she was standing on the roadside. "Patricia!" she called out in fear. But Patricia had already entered the car. "You are just a burden," she muttered. Then she drove away. The sound of the engine faded. Mrs. Grace stood alone. Cars passed. People walked by. The hot Lagos sun burned her skin. She held her walking stick tightly, her heart beating fast. "Daniel," she whispered softly. But Daniel was far away. Back at the mansion that evening, Patricia sat calmly on the couch, watching television as if nothing had happened. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The next morning, Daniel returned from his trip earlier than expected. He walked into the house with a smile. "Mum," he called. No answer. He frowned. "Patricia, where is Mum?" Patricia pretended to look confused. "I thought she was in her room." Daniel rushed upstairs. The room was empty. His heart skipped. He checked the bathroom, the balcony, the garden. Nothing. He ran downstairs. "Patricia, where is my mother?" Patricia placed her hand on her chest dramatically. "Daniel, I haven't seen her since yesterday morning." Daniel's face went pale. "Since yesterday?" "Yes. I thought she was resting." Daniel felt cold fear enter his body. His blind mother was missing. And somewhere in the busy streets of Lagos, Mrs. Grace was sitting alone, not knowing where she was. The sun was high in the sky over Lagos. The streets of Surulere were loud and busy as usual. Yellow buses stopped suddenly. Hawkers shouted. People rushed to their different destinations. But on one quiet corner of the road, Mrs. Grace sat on the bare ground. Her legs were weak. Her throat was dry. Dust covered the edge of her dress. She held her walking stick tightly, afraid to move too much. She did not know where she was. She did not know how to get home. And she did not know that her son was already searching everywhere for her. People passed by her. Some looked at her with pity. Some ignored her completely. Nobody stopped. After some time, a soft voice spoke. "Good afternoon, Ma." Mrs. Grace turned her head slightly toward the voice. "Good afternoon, my daughter." The voice belonged to a young girl carrying a small bag. Her name was Amara. She was dressed in simple clothes and worn sandals. She looked tired from the day's work, but her eyes were gentle. "Are you okay?" Amara asked. Mrs. Grace swallowed slowly. "Please, where am I?" "You are in Surulere," Amara replied softly. There was a pause. I don't know how I got here, Mrs. Grace said quietly. I am very thirsty. Amara did not hesitate. She quickly opened her bag and brought out her small bottle of water, the only one she had left for herself. She carefully held the bottle to Mrs. Grace's lips. Drink slowly, Ma. Mrs. Grace drank as if her life depended on it. When she finished, she sighed deeply. God bless you, she whispered. Amara looked at her closely. The woman did not look like a street beggar. Her skin was smooth. Her hair was neatly braided. Her dress, though dusty now, was expensive. Ma, do you have family? Amara asked gently. Yes, Mrs. Grace said. My son. His name is Daniel. Do you know his phone number? Mrs. Grace shook her head sadly. No. He always dials for me. Amara felt something heavy in her chest. Leaving the woman there was not an option. Ma, please come with me, she said kindly. My house is small, but you can rest there. Mrs. Grace hesitated. I don't want to disturb you. You are not disturbing me, Amara said firmly. She helped Mrs. Grace stand slowly. Holding her carefully, she walked her through narrow streets until they reached her small one-room apartment. The room was simple. A small bed, a plastic chair, a tiny gas stove in one corner. But it was clean. Sit here, Ma, Amara said, guiding her to the bed. Mrs. Grace sat down and touched the bedspread gently. Thank you, my daughter. That evening, Amara cooked the little rice she had left and shared it equally. Mrs. Grace ate quietly. For the first time since she was abandoned, she felt safe. Back at the mansion on the island, Daniel was losing his mind. He had already reported his mother missing to the police. Her photo was sent to news stations. Her face appeared on television screens across Lagos. Blind elderly woman missing. Son offers large reward. Daniel had not eaten since morning. He walked around the house restlessly. How did this happen? He muttered. Patricia sat calmly on the sofa, pretending to be worried. I'm sure she will be found, she said softly. But inside, she was nervous. She did not expect things to get this serious. Daniel stopped walking and looked at her. You were the last person with her. Patricia forced tears into her eyes. Daniel, how can you think that way? I love your mother. Daniel turned away, confused and heartbroken. Meanwhile, in the small room in Surulere, Mrs. Grace lay on the bed while Amara spread a wrapper on the floor to sleep. Come and sleep on the bed, Mrs. Grace said. No, Ma. You need it more. Silence filled the room. After a while, Mrs. Grace spoke softly. My son is a good man. I'm sure he is, Amara replied. He loves me very much. I can hear it in your voice, Amara said with a smile. The next morning, Amara went out early to buy bread. At a newspaper stand, something caught her attention. She froze. On the front page was a picture of Mrs. Grace. Missing, the headline read. Amara's heart began to beat fast. She bought the paper quickly and ran back home. Ma, she called gently as she entered. Ma, listen to this. She read the headline out loud. Mrs. Grace gasped. That is me. Yes. And that is my son, Mrs. Grace said softly when Amara described Daniel's picture beside hers. Amara felt both relief and fear. Ma, your son is looking for you everywhere. Mrs. Grace held Amara's hand tightly. I told you he loves me. But how do we reach him? Amara asked. Mrs. Grace thought for a moment. He owns a big company. What is the name? Mrs. Grace slowly mentioned it. Amara's eyes widened. Everyone in Lagos knew that company. That place is far, Amara said. I don't know what else to do, Mrs. Grace whispered. Amara made a decision. I will go there. Mrs. Grace looked worried. Alone? Yes. I will try. That afternoon, Amara entered a bus heading toward the island. Her heart was beating fast. She had never stepped into such big corporate areas before. When she reached the tall company building, she stood outside for a moment, staring at it. The glass walls reflected the sun. She swallowed and walked toward the gate. The security guard looked at her from head to toe. "Where are you going?" he asked sternly. "I want to see Mr. Daniel," Amara said nervously. The guard laughed lightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then go." Amara felt embarrassed but stood her ground. "It is important." The guard shook his head. Just then, a black luxury car drove out of the compound. Daniel stepped out briefly to speak with his driver. Amara recognized him immediately from the newspaper photo. Without thinking, she called out, "Sir." Daniel turned. He saw a simple-looking girl standing nervously at the gate. "Yes?" he asked. Amara took a deep breath. "Your mother is with me." Everything stopped. Daniel's face changed instantly. "What did you say?" he asked, stepping closer. "She is safe," Amara said quickly. "I found her in Surulere." Daniel felt his knees weaken. "Take me to her," he said immediately. And in that moment, the truth was about to come out. Daniel's hands were shaking as he drove through the busy roads of Lagos. Cars honked loudly, but he barely heard them. His heart was beating fast. "Is she really okay?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the road. "Yes, sir," Amara replied softly from the passenger seat. "She is safe. She has been staying in my room." Daniel glanced at her briefly. Her clothes were simple. Her sandals were old. But her voice was calm and honest. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for helping her." Amara nodded shyly. Anyone would have done the same. But Daniel knew that was not true. Many people had passed his mother on that road. Only one person stopped. After some time, they entered the small streets of Surulere. The big luxury car moved slowly through the narrow road until they reached Amara's building. Daniel parked quickly and stepped out before the engine fully stopped. "Upstairs," Amara said, leading the way. Daniel followed her up the small staircase. His heart felt heavy. He was afraid. What if she was not really there? What if this was a mistake? Amara pushed the small door open gently. "Ma," she called softly. "I brought someone." Mrs. Grace, who was sitting on the bed, turned her head. "Amara." Then Daniel stepped forward. "Mum." The moment Mrs. Grace heard his voice, she gasped. "Daniel!" He rushed to her and fell to his knees beside the bed. He held her hands tightly. "Mum, I'm here." Mrs. Grace touched his face slowly, as if she wanted to make sure he was real. When her fingers traced his cheeks, she burst into tears. "My son, my son." Daniel hugged her tightly. Tears rolled down his face freely. "I looked everywhere for you," he whispered. "I thought I lost you." Mrs. Grace held him close. "God sent this girl to me." Daniel stood up and looked at Amara with deep gratitude. "Thank you," he said again. Amara smiled softly but said nothing. After the emotional moment settled, Daniel sat beside his mother. "Mum, how did you get here?" There was silence in the room. Mrs. Grace's face became serious. "Patricia brought me here," she said slowly. Daniel froze. "What?" "She told me we were going for fresh air," Mrs. Grace continued gently. "But she stopped the car and left me by the roadside." Daniel's body felt cold. "She said I was a burden," Mrs. Grace added quietly. Amara looked down, shocked. Daniel stood up suddenly. His mind was spinning. His heart felt broken. "All this time," he whispered, He remembered how Patricia pretended to cry, how she acted worried, how calm she looked. He felt anger rising inside him. "I'm so sorry, Mum," he said, kneeling again. "I should have protected you better." Mrs. Grace touched his head gently. "You did not know." Daniel wiped his tears and stood up with a new look in his eyes, a look of decision. "Mum, you are coming home." Mrs. Grace nodded. Then she turned toward Amara. "I am not going without her." Daniel looked surprised. "She is the one who cared for me," Mrs. Grace said firmly. "She gave me water when I was thirsty. She shared her food." Daniel looked at Amara again. She looked uncomfortable with the attention. "You don't have to," Amara began. "You are coming with us," Daniel said gently. "Please." After a short silence, Amara agreed. Daniel helped his mother downstairs carefully. He opened the back door of the car for her, then turned to Amara. "Sit in front," he said respectfully. The drive back to the island felt different. Mrs. Grace held Daniel's hand tightly in the back seat. When they reached the mansion, the gates opened slowly. Inside the house, Patricia was pacing nervously. She had heard that Daniel left the office suddenly. She felt uneasy. The sound of the car outside made her freeze. The door opened. Daniel walked in first. Behind him was Mrs. Grace. Patricia's eyes widened. "Mama," she whispered. Mrs. Grace stood tall beside her son. Daniel's face was no longer soft. It was cold. "Why?" he asked quietly. Patricia forced a weak smile. "Daniel, I don't understand. Why did you abandon my mother?" Her mouth went dry. I didn't." "She told me everything," Daniel said firmly. Patricia quickly fell to her knees. "It was the devil. I don't know what came over me." Daniel stared at her, disappointed. "My blind mother trusted you." Patricia began to cry loudly. "Please forgive me." Daniel's voice became strong. "You left her on the road like trash." Mrs. Grace stood quietly, her face calm but firm. Daniel turned to his security. "Call the police." Patricia's crying grew louder. "Daniel, please. After all we've shared." Daniel did not move. "You betrayed my family." Within minutes, the police arrived. Patricia was taken away. The house became silent. Daniel turned to his mother. "You are safe now." Mrs. Grace smiled gently. "Because of Amara." Daniel walked toward Amara, who had been standing quietly near the door. "This house is open to you," he said sincerely. "Not as a servant. As family." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir." Days passed. Peace slowly returned to the mansion. Amara was given her own room. She wore clean new clothes. But she remained humble. She continued caring for Mrs. Grace with love and patience. Laughter returned to the house. One evening, Daniel found Amara in the garden, helping his mother feel the flowers. "You have changed this home," Daniel said softly. Amara smiled. "No, sir. Love changed it." Daniel looked at her differently that day. Not as the poor girl from Surulere, but as the brave young woman who saved his mother. "Can I take you out for dinner tomorrow?" he asked carefully. Amara looked surprised. "Me?" "Yes," Daniel said gently. "Just dinner." She smiled shyly. "Okay." And as Mrs. Grace watched from the balcony, she smiled to herself. Because the girl who helped a blind beggar on the roadside had unknowingly helped her own destiny. And this time, love entered the mansion not with beauty or pride, but with kindness. Wow! What an emotional journey! If you loved this story, like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing African tales. We want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where and what time you're watching from, and share which part of the story touched you the most. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next story.